Welcome into the official Jets podcast.
I eat, breathe, and sleep the New York Jets, my team.
That is a tightrope walk across Niagara Falls. That's hard to do.
It's a game of inches, so finding that one little inch to be successful, it all matters.
The official Jets podcast is presented by Kendra Scott, the jewelry company that's shining bright and doing good. Shop game day ready jewelry styles and so much more at kendrascott.com.
All right, Jimmy, so great seeing you again. Hot day here in South Florida, huh?
Yeah, a lot going on. I mean, it's been a busy offseason. I know for the Jets it's been extremely busy. New coach, new GM, new direction in a lot of ways, new quarterback. So a lot to talk about for the Jets.
So you just set the table. You met with the Jets' first-year GM, Darren Muggi. What did you pick his brain about today?
Yeah, I think, for him, he's still settling in. It's only been a couple of months. I do think he'll work well with Aaron Glenn. But I think he's just settling in. I think, getting the scouting staffs for pro days, I doubt that and I asked him about it. He hasn't had any opportunity to go out for any pro days because I think we know the pro days are somewhat scripted. You want to do a lot of personal workouts with guys. So it sounds like he's still front office-wise getting caught up to speed with everything, but has talked quite a bit with Aaron Glenn about the direction this Jets team needs to go.
What do you think about the headliners for free agency, starting with both quarterbacks, Justin Fields offensively, Jamie Sherwood, of course, and Mike linebacker, not going anywhere?
Yeah, I know Justin obviously intimately because he was with the Bears. I work for the Bears. I think he's tough. I think his teammates respect him. I do question his preparation. I think he needs to prepare much better. But there was improvement, from him to move from the Bears to the Pittsburgh Steelers, how he performed last year. There's no question he's a top-tier talent. The guy does. He's got great feet. He's very athletic. He's got a big arm. I mean, one time I saw him, they lost to the Denver Broncos. He probably had one of the most flawless first halves I've ever seen of a quarterback. He was 16 of 17 with one throwaway. I mean, that was one game where you could tell he prepared, he did the preparation, and his play really reflected it. I think it's just now it's about getting more consistency and for him to have a routine of how he prepares. But as for leadership, as for toughness, as for work ethic, I think he's all those things and then some. His teammates really respect him, and I think that's a big part of it. And it sounds like the Jets, and at least when I talked to Darren, they really like that about Justin Fields.
What kind of offensive system do you think that the Jets should run here with Tanner Engstrand coming over from Detroit? He was the passing game coordinator over there. And Aaron Glenn kept on talking about it today is that, hey, listen, don't forget about the influence of Jim Harbaugh along the way with Engstrand.
Yeah, run and play action. Yeah. And I think if you look at like Jim Harbaugh, J.J. McCarthy, Michigan was a lot of run and play action, and I think that's always been in Harbaugh's, back wheel. I think the Bears should have done a lot more of that with Justin Fields. And unfortunately, that was not the case. I think they tried to run the football the one year they led the league, but they didn't call enough play action off of it because it opens up a lot of windows when you got the players. And to me, the Jets have the pieces. They've got specialty players. It's funny. We had a caller the other day call moving the chains. Oh, there's nobody for him to throw to. I'm like, you don't know who Garrett Wilson is? Right. Are you kidding me? I love Malachi Corley, who they drafted. I think that kid's a big play waiting to happen. I love the backfield with Breece Hall. I love what Braylon Allen did. Dude, that kid's a tough kid, and he's a tough load to tackle. Yeah. So I think if you focus on running the ball and then play action, probably last year with Aaron Rodgers, it didn't happen enough. He's probably checking the things more than what he should, pass-wise, when he should stick with the run. And I think that needs to be an area of focus. They really need to tap into that more. And, of course, then he can play off the bootlegs, things that Justin does really well with his legs, where quarterback draws, where he can take advantage of his skill sets and utilize, in more capacity to make plays and move the chains.
How do you balance that, him taking advantage of his athleticism where he can just extend plays and then also just calling the game to him running at times with the zone reads, the RPOs, the boots?
Yeah. I laugh because the Bears at that point, they had played the Giants, and Brian Dable becomes the head coach there. They didn't know about Daniel Jones, and they're running the stretch play with Saquon Barkley. They must have called 16 bootleg nakeds with Daniel Jones, and the Bears couldn't stop it. I mean, so it is a problem when you create conflict of interest. You're running outside zone, whoop, bootleg, outside zone, whoop, bootleg, and teams overplay it because Saquon, as we know, probably the Giants should never have gotten rid of him. He's a problem to deal with. But there was the play action off of it with Daniel Jones, who's a mobile guy. Granted, he's no longer with the Giants. We'll see how it goes with the Colts. think he'll win that job over Richardson. But I think with Justin, it may not sound pretty and it sounds methodical,
right,
but those things stress out a defense. They really do. And Justin's really good at both of those things, and he'll get better at his down-the-field play-action pass. People don't realize he does have a strong arm. I think he's very accurate down the field, but he just needs more polish as a passer. And I think if he was broken in the right way, because I personally, again, I work for the Bears, I don't think they broke him in properly.
Yeah.
I really don't. There were some steps that were missed in his development, but I think he's found his footing. And I think Justin understands, too, he's got to do a lot of it on his own, too. He's been kind of somewhat scarred from that, and he was more assertive as a Pittsburgh Steeler when I talked to Omar Khan, their general manager. And now, obviously, the Jets have had those discussions. I know they talk around. They talk to coaches. Toughness and work ethic isn't a problem with Justin. He's been through some hard knocks. He's learned a couple of different offenses. He's had some success. He's had some failures as well. And now I think he understands the opportunity that's given with him in New York.
It's interesting, though, huh? First-round pick in 2021. This is already his third team.
Well, think about Kenny Pickett, Mac Jones. I mean, these coveted high picks. I mean, teams are trading these guys away for a box of peanuts at the end of the day. And a lot of it is because they don't know how to develop them, which is a shame in my mind. But it is what it is. The requirement to play these guys early, I think, is always way too soon. Some guys need more maturing. They need more polish. I'll give you a case in point about Justin Fields. He never called an offensive play at Ohio State under Ryan Day. So he arrives with the Bears, and it was a problem getting in a huddle, calling a play, because for the listeners out there, a lot of these college teams are running these RPOs, and they're looking over at the OC, all 11 guys turned towards the sideline. The coach calls the play, and all he does is clap his hands. At least for C.J. Stroud, who came after Justin, Ryan Day acknowledged that was a problem. So they had call-out days where C.J. Stroud had to call plays, had to spit it out of his mouth, and he had much more success down in Houston as a rookie. It took Justin probably his first year for the Bears, probably 3/4 of the season to finally get comfortable doing that. And again, you're asking a young man to lead men. There's a lot of grown men there, and here, for him to call play, it was a struggle. He's beyond that now. He's grown so much from that standpoint that he's beyond that, and he's just much more prepared with where he's at.
Did you like it how they struck that deal with Sherwood before everybody came after him?
Yeah.
Because people were talking about hey, he's going to have a lot of suitors and he's going to get decent money in the market.
Well, it says a lot about Aaron Glenn. Identified the talent, identified the playmaker. You want to retain your own. I always think that sends a good message in the locker room, of re-signing your guys, because it does. It can upset the apple cart when you start paying outsiders for guys that have really proven themselves that are in the building. And so I think Aaron, credit to him, he knows what being a Jet is. He's been in that building before. He understands it. And, you want to keep good players. And I think it's a good message that's sent to the locker room.
What does your Moving the Chains co-host, Pat Kerwin, think about Aaron Glenn going back to New York?
Yeah, he's obviously very excited. He's very proud. Aaron came over and talked to us today, so they still remain, they're lifelong friends, and they're connected in a lot of ways. And just excited for Aaron. Because I live in Detroit, I saw his impact on the defenses, and he's had to switch gears a lot of ways. When Hutchinson got hurt and they lacked the pass rushers, he changed a lot of things defensively, and he was very aggressive doing it. So comes with a lot of experience, comes with a lot of passion, as a player and a coach. I think much like Dan Campbell, the head coach of the Detroit Lions, he has a vision, brought a couple of assistants that know what that vision is and what they want to do for the New York Jets, which I'm sure all Jets fans are thirsting to turn this around. It's been too long.
Jimmy, they're definitely thirsty.
Yeah.
How much will that experience in Detroit for what they did overall help Aaron in this build here with the Jets? Can you maybe speak to some similarities and maybe differences?
I don't think Aaron Glenn will be scared to think outside the box. And what I mean by that, I look at Dan Campbell, his first year as head coach of the Detroit Lions. People don't realize he fired his OC. He started calling plays. And Pat and I interviewed Dan Campbell. He had never called plays before. He said he was outside of his comfort zone. But he said, hey, I'm the guy in charge. It's not looking the way I like. I'm going to go outside the box, and this is what I think needs to be done. And I think Aaron Glenn will be fearless that way too, because Detroit went against the grain in a lot of ways. And I think in how Dan trusted Aaron about the lack of pass rush, they've had some injuries in the secondary, and said, hey, Aaron, you figure it out. And Aaron figured it out. And, so I think he's going to be kind of fearless in that way that, the Jets, we've been kind of sputtering along for a while, and I think he'll go in a lot of different directions that nobody expects because he won't fear making a wrong decision or being criticized for maybe a decision that may work or may backfire because things need to be done differently.
He's authentic. He's so true to himself, and he's got conviction in those decisions.
Oh, yeah, I think so. I mean, these won't be like careless decisions, in my mind. I mean, they're well thought out, with what he wants to do in his vision, but they're not careless, but I think he'll think outside the box. I do.
Do you like, in a general sense, where they're going with the roster? There's only 5 players north of 30 right now, and 3 of those guys are specialists. One of those guys is your backup quarterback in Tyrod Taylor, and another guy is just somebody you brought in who you got system familiarity with. These guys know Josh Reynolds quite well.
I think when you're rebuilding the team, you do. You start young. I would expect they will draft players. I wouldn't be shocked if undrafted free agents make the roster as well, and you play them. You play them because that's how they learn. Look at Green Bay. Green Bay was one of the youngest rosters in the NFL, and they throw those kids out there and they play, and they're getting better, and they've gone to the playoffs the past couple of years. Granted, they didn't go as far as what they wanted. I look at teams like the Rams. They had probably had 5 defensive players that were rookies that were impact players, and they were terrible early. Defensively, I mean, they got shellacked by the Cardinals, in-division opponent. I think they beat them by like 5 touchdowns. It was something ridiculous. Yeah. But they kept on playing Jared Verse, who they drafted first round. They kept on playing Braden Fisk. They played Kitchens as safety. And they said, hey, fruits of their labor is going to show up later in the year. And then all of a sudden, even in the playoffs, those guys were competing against teams like Philadelphia. Yeah. And they're young. And they're a young team. And I think you got to draft them. You got to develop them. You got to play them. Because that's how they're going to learn the fastest.
You know the draft quite well. What's your take on number 7, where the Jets are at?
I think that, there's going to be good players there, because the lack of quarterbacks, everybody assumes it'll be the 2 quarterbacks taken early. Sanders, I'm not as high on Sanders as I am Cam Ward. Yep. But because, look at last year's draft. All those quarterbacks that got drafted, those are quality players getting passed up. And I think we know not all those quarterbacks, are going to be wearing gold jackets. You know what I mean? And typically your first round is about 14 to 17 guys that are true first-round players.
That's a great point.
So I think at 7, there's going to be a truly good player. Whether it's, I know a lot of people talking about the tight end from Penn State, Tyler Warren. He's kind of a one-year wonder, but he's fun to watch. He's kind of like Jeremy Shockey, the way he's out there shocking all, just doing great things with the ball. And
can help in the run and pass game, right?
Yeah, a little wildcat they ran with him, and he's just a bruiser. He's out there. He's a football player, kind of like a mini Gronkowski, just banging guys around. And but there's a lot of good players that are there. D-line is very good this year. The running backs that's a stellar class. Not that the Jets need running backs, but, to me, D-line, the early offensive linemen are good. And obviously, Jets fans saw Becton shipped off to Philadelphia, and here he is starting as a guard. Never hurts to draft the O-lineman in the trenches.
Well, what do you make, speaking of that, the tackles at the top of the draft? People are talking about Will Campbell.
I'm fine with moving Olu Fashanu to the left tackle and then drafting a guy like Membu.
Yeah, out of Missouri.
Yeah, he's a big offensive right tackle, and Fashanu, to me, is a left guard anyway, or left tackle anyway.
Right.
That's what he was at Penn State, and that's what he's going to be ultimately in the NFL. So flop him over, put him at left tackle, and draft a guy like Membu, and sure enough, your tackle spots are a lot better.
Yeah, that's where Olu finished the year last year, so he'll be protecting Justin Fields' blind side. Defensive tackle, how good is this group? Because everybody's been talking about it, raving about it for months. And with that being said, the Jets added a few guys in free agency, including Derek Nottie. But how much does it come into the equation, or factor into the equation, I should say, that, hey, this is a good defensive tackle group? If there is a Graham there, if there is
even Walter Nolan.
Right.
I like Walter. That is a slim 305-pounder.
Yeah.
He played really well down in Mobile, Alabama. But to me, this draft, defensive rushers, there's a lot of good edge rushers. There's a lot of good defensive tackles in this draft. If you want to upgrade, there's guys that are there that are available. And I look at, for, say, the Lions, one of their first guys under Dan Campbell is that Aleem McNeil.
Yeah.
He was hurt last year, but this past year he came back from injury, and that is a strong, powerful, impactful defensive tackle, and I think you can never go wrong in the trenches. If you don't believe me, go look at the Philadelphia Eagles. They drafted Jalen Carter. He didn't fall out of the top 10. And that Travis Davis is starting to play. That's what frees up those guys on the outside for them to get the sacks that they had. Is so 2 D tackles that make it happen.
We're only a few weeks away now. Where is the draft deepest on days 2 and 3?
Running back, like I said, tight end. All the guys in Mobile, from Mason Taylor at LSU. I mean, there's a lot of good tight ends. Loveland from Michigan, good tight end. There's probably about 10 to 30, I'd probably say 14 tight ends that will be drafted. All the guys in Mobile, running back-wise, will get drafted. But again, Jets don't need running back, in my opinion, but it's deep at running back, deep at tight end, deep at edge rushers, deep at the D-line.
Do you take a developmental passer?
Yeah, I've got no problem. I think you're still going to get good pass rushers, even in the 3rd round.
Yeah.
I mean, there's probably 5 guys that get drafted in the 1st round from Mike Green. Obviously, Carter's going to go quick from Penn State.
Yeah.
But guys like Mike Green, there's good edge rushers in this draft. Sprinkle. James Pierce ran a hell of a 40 time at 4.47. He'll be an outside backer in a 3.4, but 3.4, 4.3, there are really good edge rushers in this draft.
Great catching up. Yeah, I'm looking forward to the draft because, we'll finally get some answers to the test.
Yeah, absolutely. It'll be fun. Green Bay, get ready.
The Official Jets podcast is presented by Kendra Scott, the jewelry company that's shining bright and doing good. Shop game day ready jewelry styles and so much more at kendrascott.com.
What do you make of the international expansion? Jets fans know this very well. The Jets played a road game at Tottenham last year against the Minnesota Vikings. They're going to go back to Tottenham this year, but the National Football League just continues to expand its reach all over the globe.
Yeah, and it's becoming more of a global sport, right? More folks around the world are playing American football than ever before. There's a reason that the NFL has invested so much in flag football. Now you're going to get flag football in the Olympics in 2028. And I mention that because in 2032 you have the Olympics in Australia. That is a continent, a country that the league has spent an incredible amount of resources on. I know we all kind of focus on the UK, and rightly so, but Australia is probably number 2 in terms of other markets. And so that is by design, right? You have a Jordan Mailata that's coming out of there. You have rugby. It is westernized to a point. There's money. There's space to play football out there. And then they have the Olympics in 2032. So you want to get some good momentum built up for 28. We're going to ultimately see NFL players playing flag football in the Olympics, whether former or current. I think that's going to happen.
Yeah.
And then hopefully you keep that momentum building for 2032. And by the time a Roger Goodell retires, or by the time some of these owners pass the team down to their heirs, we have what is becoming the fastest growing or the largest sport, probably short of soccer still at that point.
Yeah, of course.
In the world. That's the hope.
Do you think we're going to get to a point here sometime soon where every team is going to play at least one international game per year?
I know that is the hope. And so the most expedient way to that is adding an 18th game, which would add a second bye week. So now you can do a whole lot more with the schedule, right? You add that 18th game. Well, now let's just call that 18th game an international game. You still have the 32 teams, and so there's 16 games wherever they're going to be played. If you're playing in Abu Dhabi, if you're playing in Australia, you probably have to get that bye week after. If you are playing in London, a lot of teams now have
They go right through.
that, right?
Yep.
And so you don't have to do that anymore, right? And so the league has done a crawl, walk, jog, run, and that's how they like to go about things. And so when it comes to international expansion, I think that we are in the walk to jogging phase, probably.
Yeah, I got you. And
Yeah.
then maybe way down the line, a little sprint. Okay.
There you go.
So let's conclude here with a little Jets talk.
Let's do it.
Your thoughts on Justin Fields and his fit here, and the Jets, winning in free agency, because we've heard from multiple people that the Steelers wanted him back.
Yeah, they did. There's no question about that. And if he could have probably could have gone a number of places. Look, he played really well when he was out there. A lot of coaches would not have benched Justin Fields. And Mike Tomlin did, and it paid off to a point, right? And that, we can leave that there. But I think what the group with the Jets are going to have to do is know what he does well and emphasize that. Know what he doesn't do so well and try to minimize that. But the other thing is, man, you're going to want him to run so much because he's bigger than a lot of people think that he
6'3",
is.
227 pounds. He's a truck.
I mean, and just really just solid.
Yeah.
And he's been doing this since Ohio State, and he goes through, you remember, I think it was the Clemson game, and it's like, man, he's getting rocked out there, but I want that guy on my team. And yes, you do, but you also want him to be healthy. And so you didn't see that so much with the Steelers. I thought that they harnessed that a little bit last year. And so if that can continue, and he continues to mature as a thrower, which is still possible for him, I very much believe, even though he's in, year 6 in the NFL, year 5 or 6 now?
Yep.
Time flies, right?
Yeah, it does. Just a couple of years ago. I mean, he's drafted in the first round in 2021.
Yeah. and so he can still he's not an old dog who can't be taught new tricks.
Right.
I think we saw that maturation last year, and it very well can continue now.
Interesting spot, do you think, here with Aaron Glenn in his first year, GM Darren Muji in his first year? I've talked to multiple people here on the ground who are not affiliated with the Jets, and they said, hey, listen, the cupboard isn't bare. If you look at the defensive side of the ball, you got Quinnen Williams, you got Will McDonald, who popped on the scene last year. Jermaine Johnson coming back from the Achilles. You re-signed Sherwood, the quarterback on defense. You got Quincy Williams. You got Sauce Gardner leading that secondary. Michael Carter hopefully is going to be healthy for 17 games this year. I know he's got a chip on his shoulder. You can go on the offensive side of the ball. You look at that backfield. You got some young backs. You got Breece Hall, and then you got a big-time alpha receiver in Garrett Wilson.
Right, and let's hope that the offensive line can stay healthy, right? I think that it speaks well of the previous regime that so many of these guys were retained.
Yeah.
That when Aaron Glenn says that we like to move in silence in free agency, look, there's a lot of ways you can skin a cat. You can go out there and spend a bunch of money and get into the playoffs. You can do a whole lot of nothing, get into the playoffs. You can re-sign your own, like what the Tampa Bay Buccaneers have done the last couple years. I would argue they have been winning free agency the last couple years. Like, you're keeping a playoff team together doing so really well.
And I think that's what the Jets ultimately want to do.
That's ultimately what they want to do. And so I think that they're saying, hey, there's some good bones here. And we're not just going to go out there and throw around money just because this is our first time in these chairs, or just because, okay, we're the Jets and, there hasn't been that success on the field, so we're going to show you in March. And so now it's obviously about going out there and doing it. I also like the one-year deals.
Yeah.
Right? You are hedging your bets. And you're not sitting there saying, I know football better than everybody else. Because if you did, you'd sign them to 2 or 3 year deals. You'd say, I know about this. You're saying these are one-year deals, and they're guys who have been in systems similar to ours, guys that we have known from previous stops, et cetera. And so let's just see how it works out. And I wouldn't at all be surprised if, while it is working out during the season, if the culture that Darren Muji and AG are trying to build is what ultimately gets built, I would not at all be surprised to see some in-season extensions. I don't know if Mooj has talked about that, if that's not his style or whatever. But you sign all these one-year contracts, show us. And we'll show you, and then we'll take care of you.
Number 7 overall. What do you think of the spot?
If you're the Jets, you hope that as many quarterbacks as possible go before you, right? As it stands right now, it seems that only 2 can, right? Cam Ward's going 1. Shedeur Sanders could go 2, could go 3. The Giants might try to get cute and trade back a little bit and then maybe try to take him. We'll see. But if you are the Jets, you want 2 out of the 6 in front of you to be quarterbacks. And then Abdul Carter will be off the board. Travis Hunter will be off the board. And so that's where you're talking about, like, look, this is not the world's greatest draft. And a lot of folks know and understand that. But as much as Team A may say, gosh, this is a great year to trade back, well, so are teams A, B, C, D. Like, there's only so much you can trade back, right? So to be at 7, you were still in a nice, I'm not going to call it a catbird seat, but you're in a nice spot. You have gone out, like we just talked about, one-year deals, so you haven't identified necessarily, you're open, right? And so I hate the term best player available. I hate it because it's never actually best player available. You always go back and it's like, you had that need. All these mock drafters said that you had this need, and 70% of people thought that that person was going there. Well, was it best player available? But you are in a position where you actually can do that because you have not locked yourself into anything that's too damaging.
But need could actually mirror with value this time around, or marry with value, I should say, because a lot of people are talking maybe Penn State's Tyler Warren.
Yeah, right. And
You definitely could have added another body in the tight end room, and right tackle perhaps. I know a lot of people are fans of Mambu out of Missouri, or maybe a Will Campbell out of LSU, and then the defensive tackle. The Jets added a number of pieces who are going to play alongside next to Quinnen Williams, but you might want to go defensive tackle there.
You
as
might
well.
want to double up.
Or receiver. I know people are talking about receiver as well.
I mean, it's all possible, and there are guys there. You don't want to fall too back. You want to trade down. You don't want to go back to 15 or anything like that, because some of those dudes, there's not necessarily dudes at that point. But at 7, you're going to get a guy.
Great seeing you.
Appreciate it.
Thanks,
man.
buddy.
Thanks so much.